Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our spring summit. My name is Mark Hanson. I'm Chief Architect with AHEAD. Lead up a lot of our cloud and automation practice within the capabilities that we provide to our customers. And today we're here to talk a little bit about the relationship with cloud and transformation, digital transformation of your organizations. And we're going to cover some topics today a little bit different than what you might think around capabilities, direct capabilities of the cloud, but more about some of the transformation nuances that we see within our customers. To start with, however, I really wanted to kind of define this word transformation a little bit, and maybe not define, but call out some terms that we continue to see out in the industry. Highlighting a few of these here: integration, processes, culture, customer experiences, customer itself, the technology proposition that really transformation brings, and the way to think and operate differently. I actually threw the word cloud in here in the first one, so you don't really see cloud necessarily directly in a lot of transformational type of definitions that folks have, but obviously we see it as a critical component of what it is. It's a part of the recipe. But taking that kind of loose definition, how do we define it? Transformation. What does it mean to you as the customer? Is it the cloud? Is it modern apps? Is it some sort of automation, DevOps, skills and competencies? There's a lot of different things that make up this recipe that we're trying to develop and build and bake ultimately within our organizations. But I guess I don't think it's any of these. I think it's something else. And I think it's really a system that we're really talking about. And I'm going to steal a little bit from a gentleman named Russell Ackoff. He's a professor with Wharton, was a professor with Wharton, had a number of different topics and theories that he pulled together. And one of the things that he states in one of the videos that he has, feel free to go search him out on YouTube. It's a worthwhile 12 minutes to watch. He states that the performance of a system doesn't depend on how the parts perform taken separately. It depends on how they perform together. And I think that that's something that we see over and over with our customers, and what we see within the successes that our customers have with their own transformations. You can look at all these different individual parts that are listed on the slide up above in isolation. But the challenge is how do you pull them together within a system? And how do you get the outcomes that you're really that you want to achieve as an organization? Professor Ackoff continues to go on and actually has kind of 5 theory principles, if you will, around systems theory. I'm kind of translating them here a little bit to apply to really transformation principles that we perhaps should be living by and tend to take a look at. And I think this can also guide a lot of what we see within our cloud practices and our cloud capabilities that we're trying to drive towards within technology, process, placement and decision making that we ultimately go with. So I'm going to cover a few of these here and kind of translate them a little bit from the way I see it. The essential properties of a transformation, Ackoff will say system there, I say transformation, are the properties of the whole. So we're really targeting business outcomes, right, is really what we're trying to accomplish with that. These isolated processes will cause the transformation to lose its essential properties. If you listen to Professor Ackoff's kind of TED Talk, he really didn't give a TED Talk, but there's one out there that kind of is focused on that concept. He talks a lot about how the individual properties can dictate the outcome, but they can't really drive it on their own, right? They have to drive it based on the whole. So we don't want to lose the essential property. We don't want to lose the outcome that we're really trying to achieve. The system of improvement must focus on improving the whole, right? We do a lot of system of improvements today within our organizations, within the enterprise, teams that we have and the capabilities that we're looking for. But I believe that the improvements must focus on that whole as well. The transformation program must be directed at what you want. So if we can't define what we want, it's very difficult for us to achieve that, right? And on the opposite here, what we don't want as well is probably part of what we're really targeting. Continuous improvement isn't as important as discontinuous improvement. Very interesting if you start to look up discontinuous improvement and the concepts of that. So I'll leave that one there for another research item at some other point in time. However, the way I translate these is really around these 5 things that are a part of any of our transformations within our organizations, whether we're just focused on cloud itself as a transformational activity around our data centers, infrastructure, or certain services that we're providing, or if it's really a business digital transformation itself. We're focused on customer experiences. We're focused on the outcome-based requirements. A lot has to do with communication and collaboration of the teams really delivering these defined cloud capabilities. That's where we're going to kind of focus our talk today. And the innovation and creativity is a key part of this, right? I think that the transformations that any organization is going through, however they define it, whatever they're looking for, has a lot to do with where the innovation and creativity is really coming from, and how do you start to think differently in your organization. So as stated, we're going to focus here around defined cloud capabilities and talk about some journeys and paths that we tend to see our customers go down. One thing I like to call out up front is, as we start to discuss different verticals or meet different customers across the country and the world, there's a lot of differences within how companies are organized. And I think these organizational differences can present some level of complexity. They can also present some direction on how changes need to be made across the organization. And it's definitely not just a targeted organizational change, but in the end, what we're trying to do is manage against the organizational structures that are in place and make sure that we gain some successes out of the transformational activities that folks are looking for, the outcomes and the deliverables or milestones that we're trying to achieve. May be very different from one organization to the next. Those organizational complexities, though, however, present some sort of relationship that is usually in place today from what we've seen of past in the history as companies have grown up. Very different if we're talking about new companies and organizations, startups, or potentially ISVs. Will operate very differently than this, but there is some sort of potential for a complex delivery model, because on one hand, you've got your application owners that are very focused on their customers, consumers, and they're focused on their applications. So they have a kind of a defined scope. They're really kind of looking at that with silos on from an organizational perspective, and rightfully so. They're there to provide that output. Obviously, corporate IT, titled here in that is grown up in many different ways across companies and enterprise organizations today. Really trying to figure out how to become the enterprise cloud broker or custodian of what those application owners are doing within the enterprise. They have an enterprise scope, obviously, and broad set of requirements focused on building and supporting some sort of shared service concepts. This is usually where we see a lot of the customers maturing at this point in time. Obviously, autonomy and enabling application teams and DevOps type of functions within the organization are key and very much the target and focus of where we want to go. But a lot of times there is some sort of transition that needs to take place with the transformations that companies are taking on right now to understand how to build this together. So we see a handful of things that stand out in this model. Obviously, it's a partnership, and obviously these circles will start to pull closer and closer together, especially when we're talking cloud and cloud enablement. But to begin with, I think it's perhaps less about the organization and more about the decisions that you're making and the things that you're using to enable this organization. I think that there's a set of requirements, if you will, for organizations to have some transparency across what they're trying to achieve. This is within the portfolio and the applications and the decisions that are going on, the usage and costs, procurement procedures, corporate expectations, security policies. There's a lot that flows into this that I think some organizations get stuck on a little bit because they're not clearly defined, and tends to the target tends to move a little bit. But those are things that if you can define and have some transparency across the organization, it's a known by anybody that's doing work within the cloud teams that are maybe focused largely on the cloud, or partnering with application owners and business teams to basically incorporate and get the outcomes they're looking for. those are those rocks that are defined. Many best practices exist out in the world today, whether you're looking at cloud vendors, third-party solutions, integrators like Ahead. We've got our best practices and things that we kind of see within our customers, but ultimately defining these for your organization. What are these patterns and building blocks? What are the approved deployment practices? Are there quick starts that help us enable and go quicker? Are there specifics around our training and knowledge that helps our teams grow and build up? These all help organizations move the needle further along quicker, and that's really what we see as a lot of the technical enablement that our customers and as well as Ahead focuses on to support. I will call out obviously the security and compliance thing here as its own item. It's definitely a best practice, but it's also I think something that can live and have its own life cycle to it, right? Obviously, organizations with security officers and security organizations will have their own programs and definitions to it, and I think those things feed directly into how cloud teams and cloud enablement of an organization perform and move forward. Plenty of enablers. I think this is where the smaller technical building blocks around shared services are to enable everybody to do what they need to do and focus on the business outcomes. There's a lot of enterprise platform integration that might exist, governance and guardrails, financial operations, and really some sort of app dev enablement. We see this as being one of the key items that really helps a lot of our development teams and application owners achieve success, especially in an enterprise environment that may have many tools and many different ways of doing things. How can we enable them? How can we put a package together that really supports them from a tooling perspective, a process perspective, so that they don't have to support that from a clean sheet of paper or start from a blank sheet of paper. There's a lot that can go into that to enable larger scale development teams across many parts of the organization. Along with this, and this is just one example, but there is some sort of maturity progression that we see across our customer base, and as well as how folks progress through their own cloud journeys. There's a lot that might start with level 1, level 2, and be perfectly fine staying there and living within that space. Others may be trying to achieve more of a scaling and optimize, to throw terms at this, a scaling and optimized space where it's more around application autonomy, cloud native type of services that exist, different type of relationships between what traditionally was IT and IT capabilities with the business. So there's a fair amount of transformation that happens as organizations move along the maturity curve. Many different maturity curves exist out in the environment today and out in the world today. So I think that it's a matter of defining these things and understanding how your organization wants to operate and where we are really trying to enable our cloud functions, our cloud services, and how we're going to serve those to the business, or how the business is going to consume or develop them themselves. This is one such journey that we take a lot with customer base that's going through the beginning parts of their cloud journey. Relates very much to the maturity curve I just showed. However, very focused on activities, right? What are the activities and the outcomes that we need to achieve as we take this kind of 3-step process through some sort of assess, plan, and mobilize phase into a migrate and modernize. And within that migrate and modernize, focus on the automation outputs that we're really looking to support within the business. The cloud accelerators and that part of that validate phase is really focused on understanding our cloud transformation and understanding where the planning goes into it. What are we trying to deliver? What are we trying to assess? What are we trying to provide as an outcome? There's also a fair amount of preparation, I think, on the education space within this phase of the journey. How do we prepare our organization? How do we prepare our team and our skills and the capabilities that we need to drive further down the road? Cloud foundations and initial success, I think, is really the key phase that everybody should get to as fast as possible. I think the assess phase or the validate phase can be spent with a lot of time. However, you're really going to learn a lot by doing. And once you get into that right foundational baseline and you start to enable some of these critical functions to enable the cloud and enable business owners and application development teams within your organization to leverage it and consume, you will start to find the advancement and the maturity comes a lot easier or a lot quicker at that point. It's also something that I think some folks who are striving and building more of a central function will have some struggles to try to keep up with. So you learn really quick about what works and what doesn't, and also where is the right placement of some of these functions to exist, whether it is within a central function of some sort of cloud team and cloud structure to maintain that organizational alignment, or maybe organizational enablement so that it can enable lots of teams, or are these functions and capabilities best suited to live out in the application owners and out within the business and really support them to do what they need to do and kind of get out of their way, right? That's really the goal, is to enable those organizations to do what they can do best. The initial movers are really going to drive this, right? So focusing on what those initial successes are, enabling some sort of starting point around automation. These are some of the core capabilities that we look at as part of an early phase deployment and delivery. Yes, there's operational capabilities within this space as well. I don't want to discount that, but a lot of this is around how do we take our cloud frameworks, our operating models within cloud foundations and a really well opinionated architecture around landing zones and get some successful workloads in a cloud. That will drive a lot of maturity within organizations by doing those things. And having a focused group around that to support it, I think will ultimately even drive the success better within companies, because it's not necessarily other duties as assigned. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Lastly, once you kind of have this portfolio understanding and you got the foundations in place and you have your success stories, now it's really about scaling and committing to larger activities to go on. We see organizations here and enterprise customers start to enhance a lot of the functions that they have built within the preparation phase. Obviously, migrations at scale become a discussion. Migrations, however, will lead to some sort of modernization effort. I think that migrations are a thing that everybody is focused on, and there's a lot of people trying to figure this out and figure out the financial model that goes along with it. However, it's a stepping stone to some sort of modernization, whether it is an infrastructure modernization, which is a small baby step to full application modernization, or moving forward into some sort of rewrite and re-architecture around different platforms to be more digitally enabled or provide different outputs to your business customers. That's really where that's driven towards. So a lot of the other functions here is enabling things within a cloud architecture or cloud native architecture that you may have not had in your organization in the past. As you start to transition to different platform services, availability and resiliency changes for that. So I have to understand how that works, and it may be different people that ultimately support that type of function. Last point on the commit and kind of the scaled function here. There's always a an operational function within this space that has to be matured. Obviously, you're going to start this very early on. Not that it only lives within the commit space, but this is where we see a large portion of the focus really become around some sort of operations. And I think the operations change, right? The operations of today, where maybe it is an infrastructure-focused operations, will start to change more towards application, code-based operations, security operations around the application development or cloud platforms, financial operations and optimization capabilities within the cloud, and supporting business owners to make sure that they understand the direction they need to go around that. These are the type of things that we see in this phase that become vital to scale within the business. Last few points that I want to call out here are just some considerations that I think we see as enterprise customers start to adopt and migrate to the cloud. These are kind of just generic 10 items that we pulled together across a lot of our learnings as we go through our engagements and support deployments within the cloud. Really, it's about measurement. I think there's a lot of focus on measuring technology and technology capabilities, but really we have to measure those business outcomes and find data around how we're going to measure success within our transformation and our cloud adoption. Yes, there's a lot of technical capabilities we're looking at, right? There's hundreds of services out in our cloud vendors now that we can ultimately take advantage of and leverage and utilize. But we have to understand how we're going to mature those within our organization. Security will probably always be a top challenge and a focus. I think it's a moving target with many as applications and infrastructure continues to change within the cloud spaces. So security has to continue to evolve as well. So this is something that has to be focused on, has to be understood, and has to be kind of well defined as you continue to up that maturity curve. Migrate versus modernize. Obviously, migration of some sense, whether it's an infrastructure migration, a data migration, an application migration, those are activities that are usually focused on some sort of as-is architecture and maintaining that architecture as you start to transition. Modernize, obviously modernizing the applications and the workloads that you're looking for. Many times, why I'm saying versus here is many times we're seeing a little bit of a diluted approach to supporting these activities. I think they do operate a little bit differently as customers and application teams tend to look at this. So we need to understand the differences. Can we have different functions that focus on migrations to get move the bar a little bit further down the road? And can we have different groups to focus on modernize that are really starting to look at different methods of how we invest and how we spend time to migrate versus modernize applications or different infrastructure components in our environment? I think as organizations start this out, it's a little bit of flexing muscles that they don't have and trying to learn how to do these things and providing some level of focus to these activities. I think will help folks mature further down the road and achieve more successful outcomes versus trying to mash it all together and expect a cloud team to somehow support all these activities. There's a lot that goes into these. Hybrid and multi. Obviously, hybrid cloud and multi-cloud are architectural practices that exist in our environment today, and everyone will have a little bit different approach on how they're performing this and the necessities that they have within their current workload base and customers that they need to support. But I think identifying the risks, rewards, and complexities of these is very important. I was told long ago that if you can't do one cloud well, you can't do two. So I think that I like to see folks focus on a primary where they can learn and do that really well, and then look at adding a secondary cloud where necessary and for what purpose, right? I think that that's an approach that we've seen a lot of success with our customer base. It's not about avoiding perhaps multi-cloud or a hybrid cloud type of architecture, but understanding how it's going to reward the outputs and the outcomes in the end. It's really about the business outcomes is really what the target would be. Operational practices, as we discussed, financial governance, appropriate operational practices. This is going to change in your organization from what you're currently doing. You're going to have to understand how those transition and how the skill sets transition to support it. We have continued to see a large increase in pace. Pandemic, COVID, working from home obviously has challenged and transitioned many organizational transformational programs. Adoption and migration activities have only started to increase in pace, and the expectation of durations have only gone down to support companies and gain their success. Partner alignment. I think that comes with a head. It also comes with other vendor partners that you may have and different products that you leverage today. Understand how they align to your goals and achieve outcomes in the future. I was told by a field CISO at one point in time within one of the cloud vendors that don't take the cloud out of cloud, right? And I think that applies to a lot of your partner alignment. Just because you're leveraging some of those tools and services, products today may not make sense to do in the future. You may have to transition to achieve some of the business outcomes you're looking for. So understanding how they fit into the picture is important. I would say this is one of the more important ones. Creativity and innovation are key to success as you go forward, whether you're just innovating within an infrastructure space and doing something different, automating something you haven't automated before, or truly innovating on a business end of things and the digital outcomes. Looking at how you can innovate from your vertical as it relates to the market and how you can potentially be a disruptor, I think is a very key item to incorporate into even a simple adoption and migration plan, because those are things that will pay dividends down the road as you start to have different approaches on how you support the services and deployments within your environment. And lastly, as you've kind of seen from the discussion today, a lot of this revolves around team skills and focus. I think to achieve success, there is a lot of energy and activity that is being put into cloud capabilities and technology and tools today, which are all important things. However, I think that where we've seen the most success and where the outcomes will happen quicker is when you have the right team, you have the right skills, and you have the right level of focus for folks to do the job and do the outputs that you're expecting them to do. So I think this is one of the probably perhaps number one on the list instead of number 10. But that's really where a lot of this has come from as you look through the different pieces that I talked about before between app dev teams and the business and the cloud functions that you may be describing initially. It has a lot to do with the team skills and the transparency enablers that they're really providing to the business and to the customers within your organizations. Want to say thank you very much for listening today and hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.